Well, good morning,
Everybody.
everybody.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
No, you're good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today in our second productivity series of 2021. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about outdoor decks and basically a tile and stone installation system called UZIN BalkuSlim system. And this system is a wonderful system, is a great alternative to your other floor covering options for outdoor decks and patio areas and so forth. Today, we're joined by our two tile and stone experts within UZIN. We have Dave Hamilton, who is our product manager for the tile and stone side, and we have Nick Derr, who is our technical manager for our tile and stone side. And Dave and Nick are going to be walking through a little bit on our BalkuSlim system. Again, it's just a great alternative method to installing tile and stone on outside and outdoor living areas and spaces. And it's just another way that you guys can go ahead and talk to your customer base, whether you're a distributor right now talking to a retailer or your retailer talking to that homeowner, maximizing the project and so forth. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dave and Nick. But if you have any questions as we go along here, we're going to answer all questions at the end. Just go ahead and type them in the chat bar, and then Nick will go ahead and read them off, and Nick and Dave will be able to handle it from there. So with that, gentlemen, take her away.
Thanks, Josh. Much appreciated. Okay, so again, everybody, I'm Dave Hamilton. I look after all the tile and stone systems, and we're going to talk about BalkuSlim for probably about 45 minutes or so. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of photos, a lot of job site related stuff, real world information. So it's not just rolling through a bunch of technical jargon. So I'm sure everybody will get something out of it. We did a little bit of this last year, and if you were involved in some of those, it'll be a little bit similar to that, but I've got some updates for you. So just to give you an idea of what we're kind of going to go through here. So I'm just going to click off my my video cam, and then we'll get into this here. So if you don't know a little bit about the company, so the UZIN Group, we're the North American subsidiary of the UZIN Group out of Germany. Great company. I've been with them for just a little over 5 years, and what a class organization. They are really focused on just the flooring industry and have 7 global brands. We have the UZIN brand, the Wolf brand, and the Pullman brand for North America. At some point, we might have some other brands. But what a great company, very focused on installation technologies and things that make it easier and kind of unique solutions to industry problems. And just they've looked after us really well, and of course growing. And for us, it's a people and technology business. So really love what we do here, and we're trying to take. And I started the tile and stone program about 5 years ago with a German colleague, and our little fledgling division just keeps growing and growing, and BalkuSlim's a part of that. So I saw this product 4 years ago in Germany, and at the time, our industry, and still does, is going through lots of problems with installations of decks and installations of exterior tile, lots of different things, and I'll show you some of the problems here in a bit. But there's lots of opportunity. We have an appetite and a lifestyle of outdoor living, and tile plays really well into that. But we have to be able to do a tile installation right, or there could be some significant failures. And we've been doing this kind of quietly, marketing the product, not getting too aggressive with marketing, because we don't want to oversell something, and we wanted to feel comfortable with it. So not exactly, it's been sold in Germany for quite a number of years with good success, but we also have to feel comfortable. So we haven't been overblowing the marketing on it, and we've also been working quietly with select people on a job-by-job basis, and we've got lots of installations over the last 4 years that are going extremely well in all kinds of climates, either really cold, really wet, or really warm climates. So things are going well, and I'll get into some of the reference information, stuff like that near the end. So let's talk a little bit about some of the problems out there. So one of the things I used to do is I used to be on an inspection committee for the industry, and so I get an opportunity to sadly look at some of the problems. in our industry, and exterior decks was a part of it. And here was one I looked at, like this was 2 years ago I looked at this, and at the time it was about 3 years old only. Like beautiful porcelain product, but if you can see on the left-hand side, you see a lot of efflorescence there. And that's one of the major problems we see with exterior work is, you know, we've got water or rain, driving rains that gets in premature. It reacts with the soluble salts in Thinset or even screeds. Like in this case, they used a mortar bed underneath it, and it was very, very badly plagued with efflorescence. But also you can see the grout joints completely deteriorated, and this is the second time they grouted this. So they're getting a lot of freeze-thaw deterioration on this installation very prematurely. I'll show you another one here. So here's the front of the deck. So as you can see, lots of efflorescence here build up on the front. You've got yellow latex leaching that's staining the fascia boards. And then you look at the concrete pavers below, just a mess of efflorescence and latex that have you know, accumulated below from dripping right off the surface. So real major problem there. Here's another deck that I did, and this deck was actually enclosed. It had a cover on it, but it was still susceptible to driving rains that could blow in and get into the tile, saturate into it, and then get into the grout, into the Thinset mortar, and then leach out over the edge. And this one was done with an uncoupling system. So, and I like uncoupling systems. There's some really good ones out there. They've got great performance attributes in terms of loads and isolating the tile from the substrate. But what you're doing with uncoupling systems is you're double gluing them with an excessive amount of Thinset. So you've got Thinset on the underside, Thinset on the top side. You've got to fill these plastic waffles, and then you got to set tile. And when you're doing it in exterior conditions, you've got, generally speaking, cooler slab temperatures. It takes longer for the Thinset to set up, which is actually good for the Thinset. But then if you get any kind of dew, moisture, driving rains that get in prematurely, temperature fluctuations, like we have installations literally going now in our shoulder seasons, it gets very dangerous for the Thinset to perform. And as a result, you can have these issues with efflorescence and latex leaching out of the system. So not to throw stones at uncoupling systems, because they are good, they are part of our industry, and they've been around for decades, but for exterior applications, they're a bit dangerous. So one avenue, and one thing that we have seen on these installations too, because you've got all this excessive moisture that gets built up in these waffles, they can come back and affect the grout joints. So that's that same deck that I showed you there with some leaching off the front fascia boards, and you could see how the moisture was wicking its way all the way back to the structure and was creating premature deterioration of the grout. So as a result, one thing that we've seen is a trend to pedestal systems and porcelain pavers. And these are great systems, really good. And what you're doing is basically suspending the tile with pedestals. You're not grouting, so you can put down a roofing membrane, protect the structure, and then elevate the tile. You don't have any grout, and then everything kind of washes in through the grout joints that are empty, and then goes through and drains, through the drainage system cavity. So good system, but now you're doubling the thickness and the weight of your tile. So instead of, say, a 3/8 tile, now you're doing a 3/4 inch thick tile. So it's significantly heavier. One advantage is that you can access things underneath and you can remove the tile. But in my experience, and I've handled a lot of porcelain pavers, they're easy to chip and easy to break. And another thing, because there's no grout joints, now you've got all kinds of excessive organics you know, whether it be bugs or worms or debris or dirt getting under the installation. And then if you have to remove the tile to do cleaning, which you can do, then you risk damage. So, and also there's potential of height builds. There is some thinner types of profile pedestals, but they can also create some height issues. So, but just if you haven't seen porcelain pavers, it's a good system. So with us and the BalkuSlim system, it's another unique solution to industry problems. So I'm going to walk you through this now. And essentially, BalkuSlim is got three core products. So you've got our 185 sheet membrane system. It's kind of a vinyl product, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Then we have a butyl sealant tape that links it all together and seals all the joints and the seams and the flashing details. And then you have, instead of a cement-based mortar, you've got a high-performance polyurethane two-component mortar that is waterproof, efflorescence-free, and free from latex admixtures to it. So it's super high performance. So if you look at a deck, this is what a deck assembly will typically look like. So from left to right, you've got the tile assembly, and then you got your grout to go with that. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Then you've got your TR400 polyurethane that's bonded to the gray surface there, which is your 185 sheet system. Then the yellow is the BST 150 tape. And then your RR 185 and your substrate. So let's dig into this a little bit more. So real world. So here's a cool deck that we did on Lake Ontario a couple of years ago. And this was an exposed aggregate concrete. And have you ever seen exposed aggregate? It looks brilliant when it's new, but over the years it deteriorates a little bit. You get some cement that breaks down, and then it gets difficult to walk on, hard on your feet, and kind of looks unsightly. And then you get moss growing in it and different deteriorations of it, and just gets hard to maintain. So with this one, it was a perfect candidate for BalkuSlim. So first thing we do when we get into these installs, we have to take a look at what our prep is. So we have to make sure that the floor is flat in plane to the type of tile that we're installing. So for the most part, much of what we're doing is large format. So we've got to be under 1/8 of an inch in 10 feet. So in this case, what we used here is NC 888, our patching compound. So even though we don't typically recommend it for exterior, it does have some very good water resistant characteristics, and we're also covering it with a membrane. So for this, it's very suitable. So the guys checked all their low spots and filled with 888. And this is what it looked like after they got the install done. And another product that we use for a lot of prep is our 182 sloping mortar. And this is brilliant too. It's a high compressive, fast drying material. You've got a little more working time than 888, and you got more thickness build capacity. So in this case, we also had, this is a different deck. This is like a 200 square foot deck. And in this case, it was also exposed to aggregate, but we were low on the very bottom left-hand side corner is low about 1 inch deep. So we could use the 182 here. We could screed it out a little bit more, smooth over the surface, and you're walking on it in 45 minutes. So then we could install the 185. So those are our two primary prep products. Could you use some other things like 890? Absolutely. Could you use a Thinset mortar? You could, but it's a little more sticky to prepare with. But those are our two that we typically run with. Another thing we get into at times is roofing membranes. So roofing membranes are used either by code, like in my neck of the woods, we have a code that says for any deck, doesn't matter if it's over living space or not, it must be membraned with a roofing code 60 mil membrane. So how do you stick tile to that? Well, you can't. You have to either do some type of floating system, or you got to build a mortar bed over top of it. So BalkuSlim gives us another way of being able to do this. And one of those roofing membranes that's a bit of a challenge is what is called as torch-on. So it's an asphaltic-based sheet system, and it's a great waterproofer. It's reasonably inexpensive, but the problem with this material is you've got all these overlap seams, and some of these overlaps can be, they can leave gaps in the material like 3/8 to 1/2 inch. So we've got to do some type of prep with this. We can't just try to make it up with Thinset. So again, this is where 182 completely shines on it. And you can do a double coat system with it where you do the first fill to get most of the overlap seams. And then you can do a second infill where you need to, because 182 dries so fast. And it's just a brilliant way to do it. And if you, one real tip and trick that works really good is use your smoother that we would typically use for self-leveler. Works brilliant for these seam overlaps and getting a nice uniform surface with 182. So here's a couple different jobs on the left-hand side and the right-hand side where it worked extremely well, prepping out with 182. So now into the sheet membrane installation. So this is where 185 shines, and 185, if you've never installed it, is the fastest membrane of installation that I've ever seen. Faster than a liquid applied water base, faster than a cement based material. So these are very quick to install. And one thing that's nice about 185, a number of things are nice, but one thing is that it can be sitting in your truck overnight, and you come onto the job site, or if you're traveling with it, you unroll it, and literally within 15 minutes, it lays down super flat. So it doesn't have any memory. Material doesn't poke up unless you have some edge damage that might happen in transportation. It lays down super flat right out of the gate. So this is just nice to work on. Easy to cut either with a straight blade. I like a hook blade because I can pull with it. Typically tile setters don't have hook blades, but it's super handy to have to be able to trim along walls and stuff like that. As far as layout, we just tell guys, just lay it out in such a fashion, it doesn't matter which direction it goes, but lay it out in such a fashion to minimize your seams. So you just have to take, sketch out the deck, figure out where your drops are gonna go, figure out where your waste is gonna go, but you don't have to overthink it. And what you want to do with this material is cut it about 1/8 of an inch short of either the structure or any kind of posts and pillars and supports and stuff like that. So that way we've got a little bit of movement capacity. You lightly butt the seams, but on the perimeters and up against structures, you put a gap of 1/8 of an inch, and then you install your butyl sealant tape. And this is another very quick system to do here. So here's BST 150. It's a 6-inch wide butyl sealant tape that is plasticizer migration resistant. So what that's a fancy word to say that it's compatible with the vinyl, which it is, and it'll stick to anything. And the smoother and the cleaner of the surface, it will stick to. So it can stick to virtually anything. So we use it for all the seam details. We use it up the walls, over flashings. If you have aluminum flashing, which is quite common on the front of the deck, then you can do overlaps with that. It's just really easy to install with, and you've got a double peel, so you've got 2 backings to peel, so you can do the upside first and then the downside second. So it just gives you some options there. So next thing, as we move along on the install side, like again, that is so fast. Once you get the deck prepped, the 185 goes in so quickly and doing all your seam detail. But when you get involved in these jobs, you have to be very careful about your environment. So you got to protect, whether you're working in the sun, like this particular job, we're back here on this Lake Ontario job, and it was like 90 degrees and humid during the day. So it was very difficult. So the guys, they put down tarps to protect themselves and also to protect the vinyl, because you have vinyl materials and they're going to expand and contract as you put them down. It's got one thing that's good with 185, it's got a fiberglass interlayer within it, so it helps with dimensional stability, but something we also want to protect what we put down. Conversely, if you get into driving rains or inclement weather, it could be nice in the morning and then the afternoon, you're going to get a rain shower. So protect from your environment and your elements of what you're doing. If you're doing work in the winter time, which can happen, we get these jobs. I had one 6 weeks ago, January. We're wanting to install in cooler temperatures BalkuSlim. So you can do it, but we just need some heat on some of these job sites as well to make sure everything cures out properly. So next is the installation of the mortar. So what's different about this? It's actually a really nice Thinset. It's got good sag resistance. You can use it with tile jacks, trowels nicely, and it's actually a one-handed trowel product, believe it or not. So, and it'll hold the ridge nicely. But you have to mix this thoroughly, and you've got, and I'll show you in a bit, you've got about, depending on your conditions, you're typically around 65, 70 minutes of working time out of a pail. So you've got to be mindful of your working time. And if you're working by yourself, it's doable, or if you're working with a helper, which is ideal. But get your layout done in advance, get all your cuts kind of pre-done in advance, figure out what you're going to do before you mix up the bucket. Because once you mix it up, now you're go. So same type of application procedures prevail with TR400, which means, like in this case, this gentleman on the right here, he's flat troweling. He's doing a key coat first to lock it into the 185. And the 185 has a little bit of a micro texture surface, so it allows for the mortar to wick into and grip to. So you do your key coat, and then you do your notch coat. And we're typically using a 1/4 by 3/8 notch, or I just did a deck where a guy was using a 1/2 inch, no problem. And then if you need to use tile jacks, no problem, you can put them in. So it's the one downside, if anything, to TR400 is that it's not water washable. So you have to be a bit meticulous in what you're doing, and you have to clean as you go. You have to keep your fingers and your hands clean, so you're not putting like little fingerprints all over. And then you see that little bucket with a little rag in there, that's called our clean wipes. And these are a citric solvent type of cleaner, and it works great on all kinds of adhesive residues, whether it be TR400 or other urethanes or water-based products. It does a great job of cleanup. So these are a must-have tool to clean as you go and keep your tools and hands and the surface of the tile clean. And so here's typically the kind of working temperatures we have depending on the job site environment you have, just to give you an idea of pot life. So again, very, very workable. And it's much, if you're familiar with our 460, which has got that combi can where you punch the hole in the top, it's the same kind of combi can. You let it drain down and then drill mix it. You let it drain down for about a minute, and then you drill mix it for about 2 minutes, and everything blends in nicely, and then you're good to go. So here's one I was doing just last week. Believe it or not, here we are, March, right on the shoulder season, and we had some cool days. Gosh, we had temperatures, daytime temperatures in the high 40s, low 50s, and we had overnight temperatures just above freezing. And what a brilliant mortar TR400 is. It's got to be the best exterior mortar I've ever seen in my career. It's so good. It does stuff that cement-based materials would just be, they'd be deteriorating under those kinds of temperatures. And this particular membrane is not ours. It's a fleece-coated roofing membrane that's specific for the tile industry. So in this case, the client had a deck that was over a garage, and they had leakage in the structure. They put in 2 layers of plywood. It was very stiff, really good substrate, and then they used this particular roofing membrane that would meet roofing codes and protect the structure. Because 185 is waterproof, but it doesn't meet roofing codes, so they went this way. And instead of using a cement-based thinset, which could work for this, they chose TR 400, and heads and shoulders of performance over a cement-based mortar is just so glaring. And TR did a great job of being able to lock into the fabric and just have a really strong surface. Here's another shot. And this guy was working on his own. And so he was using a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch notch, as you can kind of see there behind him. And he was getting about 28 square feet of pale and did this deck pretty much in 2 days on his own. But it just looks fabulous, great installation. And we used an 1/8 of an inch grout joint here. So on that note, which we'll be doing on this deck, is we'll be installing some soft joints, because whether you're in the industry or not, people forget about movement joints. You have to have movement joints within your tile installation. Residentially, we don't typically use them just because our spans are short, but we need to have some movement joints within the installation to act as a buffer, because tile will move, substrates will move, and it gets a lot of pressure. And what can happen, especially with BalkuSlim, is that now you've got a floating system, which has a lot of merits. It acts as a complete uncoupling system to the structure, but if you don't have movement joints in it, you can get tenting. So you need to put in some soft joints. We typically use like either 100% silicone, or we could be using, say, a polyurethane. We don't use water-based types of caulkings. We need something that's got more elastic properties to it, but they're easy to put in. Another thing we have to deal with, and you have to think about when you're going into, is what kind of railings do you have? Do you have fascia mount railings, which in many regions are code and they're kind of new age? They're awesome because from a tile setter's perspective, it gives you a really nice clean edge. You don't have to worry about, do I have to do cuts around these? How do we deal with the termination? But they're great because you don't have any holes in the top surface of the deck. So you don't have to worry about water ingress getting into your posts and how your posts are being anchored. But sometimes, like the deck on Lake Ontario, we had existing railings to deal with. So you can either butt up to it and do your cuts around it, or you can remove them and you can do some type of gasketing or BST 150 butyl sealant tape around them. But you just have to be very mindful that you're not going to get water ingress in. You may even have to do some silicone into the holes of the fasteners, because you just don't want degradation of your fasteners over time. Then somebody leans on the post and it comes out. And that really comes down to having the owner's involvement in it too. But this is just something that you have to be mindful about, is, how are we going to deal with the railings? Okay, so here's our Lake Ontario deck using this tile plank. Looks brilliant, came out awesome. Here's another one we did in Utah, and this was using thicker porcelain paver type. So people say, yeah, we've got this porcelain paver, can we bond it with TR? Oh yeah, absolutely. We've done a few jobs with these type of materials. So just because they're thicker and heavier doesn't mean that TR can't work or handle it. And here's another deck. This was the one I showed you with the 182 prep. So this is what it looked like ahead of time. So there's this exposed aggregate, kind of yucky, hard to walk on, hard to maintain. And this is what we turned it into afterwards with some nice 18 by 30 inch tile. Came out beautiful on this install. And we've got more of these. We've got a few on our website. We're going to be posting a few more. So just as we get more, it's just going back to the jobs and taking the photos. We'll have more up there for you guys. But for our requirements, it's actually quite a simple system. So the substrate itself and the structure has to be designed in such a way to handle the weight and the deflection of the tile. So you start putting tile on a structure, it has to be able to handle that type of load. And deflection, like the tile industry, like most people don't realize this, that the wood substrates must be a double layer and they got to be 1.25 inches thick. And you talk to people, it's like, no, I thought we could only use 3/8. No, you've got to use 5/8 plus 5/8 by recommendation. Now, can you get it a little slimmer if you go to, say, a 1/2 inch cement board? Yeah, absolutely. And the price of plywood is very, very expensive right now. So there is some other alternatives. We have done jobs where we do, say, a 5/8 or 3/4 inch tongue and groove plywood subfloor, and then we do 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch of a cement backer board on top. That seems to work good too. So we've got some options there. But bottom line, you have to have a solid assembly that's free from deflection. And keep in mind, some of these decks may be very low traffic, but then others, like you could have like groupings, parties, not obviously right now, but certainly people use them to entertain, and you could have lots of people on them, and the last thing you want to do is have cracked tile. If you're doing exterior work, because sometimes we can do this interior, but if you're under exterior conditions or areas where you're going to have maintenance, it has to be slope to drain at least 2%. And then it's got to be flat and plain to the tile size tolerances. So if it's large format tile, it's got to be 1/8 inch or less in 10 feet. And that's where our prep comes in. And pedestrian foot traffic. So it's really not made for heavy rolling loads. Like I wouldn't use it, let's say, in a motorcade in front of a hotel if you're looking to do a tile assembly there. But anywhere where you've got pedestrian foot traffic, could be in a restaurant, like a restaurant patio, stuff like that, no problem. But if you've got heavy carts with hard rubber wheels and you've got heavy loads being point loaded on it, I wouldn't recommend it for those type of conditions. But stuff that's pedestrian foot traffic, good to go. So that's as simple as it is. 4 different types of requirements. The other thing that shines over is all kinds of substrates that would be kind of taboo to stick a tile assembly to. So we could go on freshly poured concrete, because the 185 allows for vapor transmission to kind of move around underneath it. We can go over pressure treated plywood, which would be a no-no typically. And even plywood, we would not normally go over anyways with a thinset mortar. So 185 allows us to isolate ourselves from the tile assembly, various tile backer boards, of course, but roofing membranes, deck coatings, steel, fiberglass, epoxy, stuff like that, we can go over. Vinyl decking, we can go over. Some people may have vinyl decking and they want to, spruce it up and turn it into a ceramic installation. So we could do that. Wet or cold substrates that won't allow us to bond to, we could do. Contaminated substrates, could be painted even. We can't stick to paint, but with 185, we can do isolated system over it, or even a crack substrate. So as long as it's not moving up and down, as long as lateral cracks and we don't have out of plane cracks, good to go. Acceptable applications. Like I said, most of the work we're doing is exterior, but you could have an interior application where you want a floating system of this nature, because one thing that's cool with it is that it's removable. So if you ever needed to remove it, maybe it's an elevator cab where it's a metal substrate, and maybe at some point in the future they want to change it out to something else. So you could do BalkuSlim for that, just in a smaller application. For sure, anything residential, decks, sunrooms, and then light commercial with pedestrian traffic, as I kind of mentioned there. Okay, so on a little bit of a focus on the materials now. So 185 comes in a sheet system. They are 6'6", 2 meter wide rolls, and it's essentially like handling sheet vinyl. Same type of thing. It's a great surface to work on. You've got nice smooth surface, easy to put markings on, that kind of thing. It's completely waterproof. So once you get it all sealed, but again, it doesn't meet roofing code standards. Everything is a straight go. You don't have to do any, like you would on an uncoupling system where you'd have to parge the whole installation with Thinset. You don't have to worry about that extra step. It's just go. But it is an uncoupling membrane of sorts because it isolates the tile from the substrate. So if there's movement in your substrate, it's not going to transfer through unless it's an out of plane movement that pokes up through. It's not going to telegraph from below. And like I said, you could go over all kinds of systems that you wouldn't be able to do a direct bond to. The TR, again, like I said, it's got to be the best exterior mortar in the industry. It's curing ability, there's no efflorescence, there's no latex leaching, it's way better. It kind of goes to sleep when it's cool at night, it kind of goes to sleep, and then the next morning when it warms up, then it starts to react again. So it's a reactive resin type of adhesive. So it needs temperature and the part B activator to cure. And when it's all mixed properly, it's really, really robust. As you trowel it and you set tile into and you get your 95% or greater transfer for exterior, you have almost a void-free installation, so water can't necessarily build up underneath the material. Like if you use a cement-based system, it's kind of absorbent and it's like a sponge and it soaks up water, whereas TR will not do that. So now you're limiting the water that can get under the tile and affect the long-term performance. And like I said, great for shoulder seasons, great for doing work, whether you're in the spring or in the fall where it would be kind of dangerous to use a cement-based mortar. So the money side of things. So lots of opportunities, and we have lots of people that are really, really gun shy and really scared to do exterior work just because the liabilities are huge. There's been lots of failures, and that's another reason we're just trying to work with people and not oversell it and overmarket it, just to make sure that the education's there, people understand how much it's going to cost. So if we look at our costs in this, and this would typically be what a flooring store would pay for our materials through our distributors. And if we have any of our friends from Canada, if you take these numbers and you multiply them by about 1.3, that's about what a Canadian flooring store would pay for this. So we have our 185 cost into this. We have our adhesive, and the adhesive, unfortunately, the downside is it's expensive, but by the same token, it's really one of the make or break components of this entire thing and why it works so well. So at $4.50 a square foot and upwards like that, like I said, times 1.3 for Canada, it's quite a bit more. But overall, that's your make or break system in it. BST is not inexpensive, but you don't need a whole lot of it. Then the UZIN Clean Box. We're typically using, what we've done so far to date's been with cement-based grout, either with ours or other manufacturers, and it's worked really well. We haven't had any issues with grout deterioration on it, but we are going to be launching an epoxy grout in the summer. That's going to be another performance attribute. Like you got people with barbecues and all kinds of spills, so we'll be able to offer probably a 2-segment warranty. One warranty for cement-based grout, another with the epoxy. So it'll be another kind of selling feature. But coming this summer, we'll have our epoxy out, and our epoxy will be UV stable for exterior, and it will be recommended for exterior. Then you got your trims. There's a variety of different things that you can use from some different people, whether it be our friends at Schluter, who's got lots of different decks, but then there's some other suppliers of metals that also have some great systems as well for doing terminations around the perimeter, or they could be just a typical L type that goes underneath the tile, or even a reducer. So there's lots of options there depending on what you have, but you've got to include that in, obviously. Then some movement joint sealant. One thing that's helpful too is having a tile and stone sealer, like a high performance exterior sealer. Some types of tile needs to be pre-sealed because you have micropores in it, even porcelain. But that's helpful for long-term maintenance. So you got to add that in. And then your total dollars, this is our side of things. I mean, obviously you got labor and the floor covering on top of it. So it's not an inexpensive system, but again, you start doing these decks and you add it all up at the dollars. We're increasing the value of people's homes with these installs. And you've seen some of the photos I showed you there. Like it's quite awesome of what we can do. And you know what? If people want to do it right, they're not going to hesitate paying the money from what we've seen. So warranty, we're pretty much handling on a job-by-job basis. You know, currently we're typically 10 years, and really, you talk to most people, and it's like, well, decks aren't even warranted. It's like, well, no, they are. We do have a warranty on it. So, so we do that. Like I said, I'll probably differentiate our warranty a little bit with once we launch out the epoxy, I might have a 2-tier warranty system to just justify the added cost of the epoxy. Maybe we'll go 10 on cement base and 20. It's hard to know yet. We haven't made a final determination, but I'm thinking that's kind of where my head is. And it covers labor and materials, and must be installed as our recommendations. And I'll show you here in a second. We've got a really good, easy to read instruction sheet. We want the involvement of our guys on this because it is a technical application. Not that it's that complicated, as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. But you know what? If we can intercept one thing, and I was on a job site, if I wasn't there, it could have been a nightmare because you know the installer, he'd never used polyurethane before. And so it was a bit clumsy for him. So, but once I got into it, the job was a total success. But having the involvement of our technical guys are there is going to be critical. And then also we're trying to encourage as much as possible to single source a lot of the components if possible through our distribution. So that our distribution can single source it as well. Just in the case that, you know, if there is a warranty claim, then you know what, you've got one supplier involved in it, not, you know, 2 or 3. So here's the installation document, pretty easy to read, front and back. The front just tells a little bit about the system and the layout. So this is really your go-to document. On the back side, you have your pre-installation checklist, like all the things you need to know. You know, what do I need to quote on? What do I need to make sure that I address in it? So if you have questions on these, this is where our UZIN team can help you guys. Some of the important things to be mindful about, like control joints or temperature, stuff like that. But it's an easy to read, doesn't, you know, some of these documents you read from some manufacturers are so full of legal jargon. This just gets down to really the nuts and bolts of the installation. And then it's our website. So this is where it's all available. So we have, Josh has done a great job, him and his marketing team, just having a section on our website that's specific under tile and stone for our BalkuSlim deck system. So this gives you all the literature on it that you need to know. So we've got a brochure part of it, and that's available. And this is all available in PDF. And then you have your instruction sheet, and then there's some other job site reference stuff that we're continuing to upload and post. So how did I do? I think I'm right at the 45-minute mark. So I guess if there's questions that have come in, and Nick, if you can maybe take a look at that and we can have a discussion. If you got, hopefully I answered all your questions, but if you have some more, or if something pops up at a later date, you can certainly reach us, that's for sure.
Yeah, Dave, you did an amazing job. I just wanted to point out a couple things, guys. We talked about our patches to create that slope and help fill in those bellies of the floors. And I really wanted to highlight our new Hydro Patch 890. It is a product that's meant for 100% RH exposure. It's going to continue building compressive strengths in those high moisture environments. So in this application, it makes a lot of sense. It's easily done from a skim up to a 1/2 inch at a time. So you can really get to that depth and make that slope happen with the product itself. Do we have any other questions out there, guys? Because I haven't seen many come through yet that Dave didn't answer through the conversation in the PowerPoint.
Well, it looks like Dave, you did a very, very good job on answering those questions there, and and really, truly a very, very unique system. I know you're very passionate about this system, and it is a great system if you're looking for an alternative method to basically install outdoor tile and stone systems. So definitely appreciate your time doing that. Any last questions before I close it out here, Dave?
None for me, other than, yeah, if we can help you guys at any given time, that's what we're here to do. You know, we don't want to just sell you stuff. We want to be a resource, whether you have questions about this system or anything else. You know, we're trying to continue to build on the tile and stone line. Like I said, we've got epoxies coming up. We've got some caulking and sealant stuff coming up. We've got more new stuff that Nick and I are working on. And we're here to help. So if you have any questions, you're never bothering us. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and attention this morning, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us on the productivity series. We're going to continue this. Our next one is going to be coming up in the 1st of April on the Wolf Robo Stripper. If you haven't seen this, you may have seen some sneak photos of it. Definitely highly recommend that you attend that webinar. And certainly this is part of our productivity series, which is part of our global campaign of UZIN offers more. And as Dave mentioned, one of the things that we want to do is we want to be the best technically serving company out there for you. Our reps are coming out to job sites very safely. And so we want to be out there to help you install the BalkuSlim system or any of the other UZIN products as we go about here. So take a look on our website. The recording of this will be up next week in case any of your colleagues may have missed it or you want to go back and review. And with that, we appreciate it and have a great day.